It's 2018. The Golden State Warriors have just swept the Cleveland Cavaliers to win the title. We've got that situation. We've got Kawhi, who is still a Spur at this point, but has missed most of the season rehabbing and is starting to avoid Spurs personnel. So something's going to be interesting there, right? He's going to be maybe on another team. We've got LeBron in Cleveland still at this point, but that's not going to last long at where we're at right now. In 5 days from this point, James Harden is going to win the MVP, beating out the Cavs' LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And that sets the stage for something that's big. We're about to, of course, see the fallout of the 2019 NBA draft. But the big thing here is this draft, the 2018 draft, sets the stage for a ton of things that have happened now. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So let's get started.
This is the Upshot Podcast. We're about to break down the biggest moments in the NBA.
Long three! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining!
And why they matter now. This is the Upshot Podcast.
All right, so I'm here today with Nick Atkins, Marshall Robertson, and Joe Baltz, and this is the Upshot Podcast. We're talking about all the big things that have happened in the NBA and why they still matter now. And today we're talking about the 2018 NBA Draft. This was a big one, and we've seen all the big things that have happened since. But to really understand everything that happened in the last year and a half and the craziest free agency offseason that we've had in a very long time, you've got to really understand this draft and the things that surrounded this draft. And so you got to start at the beginning here. It's just this perfect storm of things that has happened, and it's really pushing things in a direction. And it all starts with, a real interesting final. And that final is, for several years, the final we've come to expect, which is the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's LeBron versus Golden State, basically, is what we've got here. And I think we all knew that by the time that this thing was going to be over, we were going to see some shakeups. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but we were going to see some shakeups. So, what about this final? Because, we'd seen some heroics from LeBron a little earlier. But coming into this, the way this one actually ended, what about this final told you all that we were there? Nick, where were you at the end of this final?
Well, it was where was LeBron going to go? It was really everybody had been talking about L.A. for pretty much the entire season. Even I think the Space Jam talk was going on at that point, that was going to be in the cards. And I think LeBron the year earlier, right, they had surprised everybody and beaten Golden State to win the title. But this one was pretty clearly, I've got a pretty vivid memory of him pointing to his, what's his guy who forgot how much time was left on the clock?
J.R. Smith, yeah.
What's that?
J.R. Smith.
J.R.
money.
moment.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's still being used.
The meme essentially was looking at J.R. and saying, I'm out of here. I'm going to L.A. So that was really the first domino to fall for me. The NBA was about to change in a big way because maybe arguably the best player of all time was about to switch teams yet again.
Yeah, and so he's about to be a Laker. We know that's possibly going to happen. I'm getting really excited as a Laker fan, even though I'm a little nervous and had good reason to be. Now we know that things were going to be interesting. Of course, we're going to see where this year goes. But so LeBron goes there, and then we have this Kawhi situation. And, even before we get into this draft and how amazing this draft turned out to be, you really look at the stats. This draft in 2018 was nuts. But we've got Kawhi that's about to leave. And we can't get away from talking about what happened there. And this has been beat to death 1,000 times. But you have to set the stage here. So with Kawhi and the Spurs, what was going on right around then, and what was the vibe that led to some other things?
Well, it's weird because at the point we're at now, I think a lot of people just kind of recently, because of the crazy run that Kawhi just went on with Toronto, just now kind of figured out who Kawhi was, and now he's kind of on the landscape. But Kawhi, looking back to this time frame, was really starting to set in stone his plan. And his plan included sitting out on the Spurs. I mean, he literally quit on that team.
That
narrative didn't really seem like it was out there like it should have been because of the star impact player he was, but he really did quit and missed most of the season. He's rehabbing in New York. He's avoiding all Spurs personnel.
They literally can't find him. There are reports
Yeah.
where they sent Spurs personnel to New York to go talk to him, and he hid in a different room so he wouldn't talk to them. Look, it was and I don't know if we'll ever know the full story, okay? But Kawhi had some injury. Look, he's still dealing with that injury. Every time I saw him in the Toronto series, he's
limping.
limping,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so there was disagreements apparently between him and the team doctors, but how much were there actual disagreements and this guy just wants to go home to LA?
Yeah, I think the narrative for fans, we wanted to believe he was hurt, and teammates are questioning him. Everyone's questioning the injury, but once the Spurs made the playoffs without him, and he didn't even travel with the team, like everyone just thought, well, he's waiting till the playoffs. It doesn't matter. I mean, so 6 or 7 seed, where are they going to land? They get their seed. They're going out west to play, and he doesn't even
no
go.
show.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was writing on the wall for everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
To top it off, you've got James Harden in Houston winning the MVP over
Yeah.
LeBron and AD.
Yeah,
And,
interesting there, right?
Yeah, and it does. It starts to tell some stories because you got these two guys who, now ended up in LA together.
And to speak to your LA point earlier,
Yeah.
look, I mean, that's the thing you got to remember is this is 2 years removed. These guys both finished top 3 in the MVP voting, and now they're on the same team.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
And
they're
it's
older.
scary.
But, yeah.
It took some work,
Right.
But that's where they are. And so, before we actually get into draft day, finals end. You've got Kawhi, you've got the LeBron situation, you got all these things starting to stack up, and then June 21st, 2018, in Brooklyn, New York, we arrive at draft time.
Good evening, and welcome to the 2018 NBA Draft at Barclays Center, home of the Brooklyn Nets. To the fans here tonight.
So the draft's here, and we get into what will go down in history as one of the greatest drafts ever.
We certainly think so.
Yeah.
Looks like it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of casual fans don't realize this because of you've only got sort of your casual context, which is okay, this one season and what was done. And of course, we've got some stars, but a lot of these guys, are going to be even bigger stars in the next little bit because some of them are sitting, in these smaller markets, obviously, and so they're not on the big radar yet, even though they're kind of fun to watch. But let's sort of go through and let's talk about what we've actually got here in the top 10. The top 10 of this draft in 2018 when, the smoke clears over this top 10, what we've actually got. So, Nick, from the top picks to the bottom, what do we got?
Sure. Well, Phoenix came out pretty early, and they tied themselves to DeAndre Ayton pretty quick. And there are, the fact of the matter is DeAndre Ayton had a pretty good year this past year. I mean, it was a pretty good first year, and he was strong. And but the problem is, I think with a lot of people, it's, you want to take, if you're in this position, and especially if you're in Phoenix, which would warrant it, because it's not like Phoenix has any type of established identity right now, right? You're not talking about the sons of Nash and things like that. So, why not consider taking Luka number 1? A lot of people thought Luka was the go-to number 1. A lot of people didn't think that there was enough difference between Bagley and Jackson either, which they ended up both going in the top 5. But essentially, it was DeAndre Ayton first at Arizona, and then Bagley from Duke going second to Sacramento. There was the trade, and Luka ends up going to Dallas. Jaren Jackson Jr. goes to the Memphis Grizzlies, and then Trae Young, to round out at least the top 5, ends up going to the Atlanta Hawks.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, with that, the big winners, if you're just looking at, points per game, everybody does okay. I mean, nobody could really bust.
There's a lot of solid players on
Yeah.
the top 10
Yeah,
list.
yeah.
Very solid.
We get to the end of that particular season, at the end of 2018, 2019, we continue the season, and you got guys, either putting up 20 points a game or knocking on the door. And even if you're not, your rookie year, you're putting up 15.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And so, we get into that, and one of the most interesting facts is, when we get into the trade, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the 6 through 10, I think we have to mention these guys because it's important.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of I think we'll see on these guys. The first 5 we've all heard of, and they've all been pretty successful. But you get into 6, and immediately you see Mo Bamba's name, and we don't really have any idea. I think he's got maybe the largest wingspan of anybody in the NBA, which is a cool stat on paper, but we certainly haven't seen anything from him in Orlando yet. And they just signed Vucevic, who's sitting right in front of him on the depth chart, to another long-term deal. So he goes 6 to Orlando, and then Wendell Carter Jr. goes to Chicago from Duke. Colin Sexton goes to Cleveland, which is the draft pick. That's a LeBron-less Cleveland, and that's their first pick after that. Kevin Knox goes to the Knicks from the University of Kentucky, and then to round out the 10, it's McCall Bridges from Villanova going to Charlotte.
So I got to talk about Cleveland.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that pick. I think they're happy with Colin Sexton. They're
pretty good
They're
year.
very pleased.
He
He
had
had
a
a
pretty
very
good
good
year.
year.
Yeah.
What's the thinking when they take him? You've lost LeBron.
Well, and they're still trying to replace the loss of Kyrie at that position. Obviously,
Well, LeBron wasn't gone yet, right? I mean,
He's about to be.
I remember the
literally about
interview
to
of
be.
they're interviewing Sexton, and he's talking about playing with LeBron. And then it's a couple days later, I'm reading the tweets about how they're asking him about, okay, now LeBron's gone, how do you feel? Which,
Sure.
I mean, he did a great job.
And
He
I
wasn't
wonder how
good.
much LeBron was in on that pick, too, of like, hey, LeBron, we want you around. Who do you think? And it's like, hey, Colin, I'm out of here either way, guys. But
Yeah.
The team knew. The team knew, but he probably didn't, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But I'm guessing LeBron probably made a phone call to you, but he couldn't say anything.
It's a shift. Look, it's a shift for Cleveland too, because if you're Cleveland, you kind of lucked into, again, one of the best players to ever play the game, being from there, wanting to win a ring at home. But otherwise, you're not the biggest market. You're going to have to win by drafting players. Okay, they've still got Kevin Love. They paid Kevin Love. But Cleveland is going to have to build like most every other small market from here on.
Kevin Love is still in the league.
Still in the league.
Wow.
He's still around. Still around.
What do you know? He's got a great Instagram.
He's
about that?
I was going to say he's got a great Instagram.
He's got a great
He does.
Instagram.
He
If
does.
you guys,
Oh man, I'm gonna go
He had
follow
a great
that right
summer.
now.
He traveled all over. He had a great summer.
If
Good
you
for
don't want to
Kevin.
watch him play ball, go watch his Instagram. It's really
Nice,
good.
nice.
So I think that we've got to actually talk about this. We've got to talk about the top 5 and why the top 5 actually matter. Yeah, they're great players. They had great seasons. You're between 15, 20 points a game, which is a great way to start your NBA career if you're setting the table, especially for some bigger contracts down the road. And they're fun to watch. It's fun to see a new guy come in and do that kind of thing as a fan. If you're sitting out in the bleachers and you're watching this stuff, that is amazing to see somebody that's brand new that you didn't have to make a big trade for necessarily. Well, we'll get into that, but to see that kind of stuff happening. And
Well,
so
let's be real. We're all Memphis Grizzlies fans. We saw it this year. We got to see Triple J show up for the Grizz, and he was solid. And I think we're going to have a solid corner piece to build the franchise
I
around.
mean, it wasn't, from a win standpoint, it wasn't, the biggest season, but to be able to go watch that guy, that was always entertaining.
Yeah.
And
He's quickly the best player on the team.
Right.
It was pretty evident. Besides maybe Mike, but it was pretty evident.
Yeah. And so what's the big thing here is something has never happened except for once. The last time that this actually went down, that the top 5 picks, let's talk about that because the top 5 picks fit into a very interesting stat here.
It was the first time since the 84-85 season, which is when Michael Jordan was drafted, Hakeem Olajuwon was drafted, Charles Barkley was drafted. The first 5 picks actually made the all-first NBA rookie team. And again, that hasn't happened going back since 84-85. Now, look, it could be happenstance. The league could be down. But with these, especially these top 5 picks, everybody's talking, and statistically it shows that they could be around. They could be around for a long time, and they really fit into this new mold of the NBA to where it looks like they're going to be successful cornerstone pieces of their franchise.
Well, and doesn't it feel like we've been kind of in a string of busts in top 5 picks for a lot of years now? Yeah. So when you just named Olajuwon, Jordan, and Charles Barkley out of that, immediately I'm thinking I'd take those 3 guys and any 2 scrubs.
Yeah.
We're going to town.
Yeah.
Well, now we're looking at literally all top 5 guys, and I think right now you could put a solid team together with those 5 guys.
You really could. You could put those guys on any team and build around them.
Right. And like we said a while ago, I mean, looking at 6 through 10, who's not to say that one of those isn't going to be better than one of these 5? I mean, I think
it's early,
the stat really brags on the draft overall, and the teams did a great job of looking at the talent. But I mean, I'm looking down there from Knox to Sexton. I mean, Carter. I think any of those guys could emerge as perennial all-star type players.
And it's situational, right? I mean, the guys in the top 5 were lucky enough to go to teams where they could be put in right away and have a chance of success. And again, Knox and New York, the Knicks, it's a shit show.
Yeah, let's be clear. All 10 teams that drafted are pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, all 10 of these
Yeah.
teams are bottom dwellers last season.
Well, and let's sort of dive into the conversation of this. It's these teams are bad, and they're smaller market, and we love having
smaller market.
We love having this conversation about how do you win a championship as a small market team? And it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
You got to do it through the draft.
You got to build through the draft.
You got to build through the draft. And so you look at a lot of these teams right now, and not only are you picking up, okay, this was a great draft. This is a great bunch of people. But you start seeing teams that are having to play the draft to do big things. You start seeing them set the stage for the 2019 draft. But more importantly, they're setting the stage for some very interesting things that are going to happen at the trade deadline. And I don't think all of that, of course, had materialized. But, think about the course of events that this sets up. You've got Jaren Jackson. Can you get rid of Gasol if you don't have Jackson in place? And, of course, we made a great trade for, to do some things there. And we saw everybody wins in that trade. But this set of picks for every team sets up a lot of dominoes to start falling midseason all the way to the 2019 draft. Yeah. So interesting. And like I said, we don't even know the full extent of it yet. But, Rookie of the Year, I think we got to talk about that and with Luka. And what did Luka mean? Because we're about to get into an interesting conversation about that whole thing. What did Luka mean to that team this year?
Well, Dallas, I guess this is was this pre-Kristaps? They hadn't made the trade for Kristaps yet?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and so Dallas is down. Dirk is aging. I think Dirk, he's done after this year. This was his final year. But look, it's my opinion Luka is the best player in the draft, and I think he's going to be one of the best players going forward for the next 20 years. Luka comes over from the Euro League where he's playing already with arguably NBA talent, okay? And so he may be playing with, it's certainly, I would say, equivalent, but better talent than even these guys are seeing in college. And he's this new, what we call point forward, right? He's not a straight point guard. He's not a straight power forward. He's not B.J. Armstrong, and he's not Karl Malone, okay? He's a bit of a unicorn. And he comes out. I clearly agreed with him winning Rookie of the Year. Trae Young certainly made a push there at the end, but he really changed the hope of the entire franchise. It's a rebuilding block for Dallas. And then when they pair him with Kristaps, they could be looking to compete this year.
When you look at his stats, he walks in the door and he averages 21, 8, and 6.
Yeah.
All right. You know what? You did pretty good. Yeah. Even if you pick that guy number 1, you're happy.
Yeah.
And I got a question for Joe here. It's really interesting that you're talking about how this guy's set up as a player. Now, you can just say that he's, like I said, a unicorn, or you can say that this guy's maybe building a model, because you really think about back to high school, back to junior high school, when kids are playing ball, they're put in a position. And of course, talent, makes you where you can do a lot of different things, especially at the high school level. But you start seeing something like this, and it bleeds through. It starts to bleed and trickle down into high school as to how, when you see a certain player that's a certain way, you start saying, well, you know what? You kind of look like this guy in the NBA. And so you start putting them in different positions. And what do you think about that? Like, because, I think that when you start seeing new kinds of players doing new things, and maybe I'm wrong, but you start thinking differently as a coach too.
Yeah, I think honestly it happens way more than what the casual fan realizes already, because we're not picking apart elite versus elite. At the high school level, even college level, I think that you see a lot of players play out of position just because of the talent that's on the team, the roster, and the way that they're scheming. So, at this level where it's so elite is where I think you see it less. I mean, if I was really picking out Luka type guys, run down the list of greats. You got Magic Johnson,
right.
You've got LeBron, you've got Ben Simmons. Guys that you're just like, wow, that doesn't look like a point guard, but they can play that position. And I think you see that all the time in high school sports, where maybe a big's playing a guard spot, or a little guy's just overplaying their size down low just because they're so fundamental or so great. So it's cool to see that translate maybe at the younger level than it is at the NBA level. But I see that all the time.
I think it's also interesting, and who knows how much this plays into it, but I think it does have a lot to do. Go back to the Dream Team, way back to the Dream Team, and that was a big deal. If you were a guy our age, or a girl our age that's a big NBA fan at that time, that was something special.
Oh yeah.
But what that led to, the trickle effect of that is you've got all these kids who love basketball, but now they get basketball coming to them. And so you have all these kids now, and in the last 10 years, that have, started to come into the NBA that are somewhat a byproduct of what, the original Dream Team did by exposing a lot of the world to basketball. Because listen, there's been a lot of basketball, in the Olympics, but nothing quite like that. No hype like that. And I think that there's a lot of kids that, take up basketball for the first time as a really small kid because of what happens there. And like I said, the last 10, 20 years, you started to see that really, the explosion of foreign players coming over and the talent level has been huge. And so as you get into this sort of draft and what's happening and we get into some of what's coming over, I think, you have to look back 20, 30 years of how we got here. So it's interesting. The next thing is this very interesting trade. And we're in the middle of all this. We've got all this pandemonium that is, erupting, or if it's not erupted yet, it's about to happen in the NBA. And we have this trade go down. And so talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it was the trade between the Mavs and the Hawks. The Mavs had the 5th pick. The Hawks had the 3rd pick. There were some rumors. Okay, the Hawks had just hired their new GM. I think his name's Travis Schenck. He had just come over from Golden State, and it was pretty clear that he coveted Trae Young, and he was certainly kind of putting Trae Young in that mold of, is this the next Steph Curry? But again, a lot of people felt like the Hawks should have been looking straight at Luka. A lot of people felt like the Hawks or any of the teams in the top 5 should have been looking straight at Luka. But come time for the 3rd pick, and I think it was really close. I think it was pretty close to that pick coming down. It's announced that the Mavs have traded their 5th pick to the Hawks for that 3rd pick and given them a protected first for next year. And so when that happens, it's agreed upon. It's that weird NBA thing where the team actually still drafts the player for the next team, which I hate that. I wish they could fix that up. But Trae Young ends up getting drafted and then Luka. But Luka essentially ends up on the Mavs and Trae Young ends up on the Hawks. And we don't really know how the rest of that trade's going to shake out yet. The Hawks are a pretty exciting team. So are the Mavs, right? And so you could say that it's pretty close. Trae Young finished 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting, so you could say it's even closer there. But also, I think that pick that was protected for the next year, the Hawks did use it this year, and they took, it looks like, Cam Reddish from Duke. And so the concern is always, if we're going to make this trade and Luke is going to be this perennial all-star player coming out right away, well, that's great that we got an extra pick out of it, but who cares if they're a lot better than us, right? Yeah. And so, it worked out. It was protected. It ended up being the 10th pick. I have no idea about Cam Reddish, and I'm not sure anybody does. We know he's kind of a freak in nature and could be a good player, but there's also plenty of times that we watched him at Duke last year where we had no idea he was on the floor, right? And so there's a mixed bag of reactions there. But when people look back at this draft, the first thing that's going to come up is this trade. Because I think we're going to be talking about Luka and Trae Young for a long time.
So who actually, we have to shoot forward 5 years from now, obviously, to actually get this answer. Who won? And which team actually came out ahead, do you think?
Yeah, see, I see different answers there. Yeah. I think initially, you got to say right now that the Mavericks won. Mm-hmm. Luka is a superstar, potentially a worldwide superstar, and he's going to be an ambassador for the game across the globe for a long time to come. So I say right now, initially, yes. But I look at a package of Trae Young, Cam Reddish, and then they also took DeAndre Hunter, who is a pretty solid front court player for Virginia.
They took Herter in this draft, who had a surprisingly good year last year.
And I'm seeing young, talented guys getting stacked up in Atlanta, and I just can't see a scenario in the next 10 years where you don't have 2, maybe 3 perennial all-stars and a potential superstar in Trae Young. Yeah. So I feel like maybe the Hawks could come out ahead in 10 years.
I'll be honest, I just didn't think Trae Young was going to equate to the NBA as a Steph Curry type. I just thought, he's a great scorer. He's a phenomenal scorer. I believe all those things. But really, in hindsight now, if you look at the way Steph played the first year, it was similar. He's a great scorer, and he's adjusting to a game of where everyone's bigger, everyone's athletic. But I just mean, it takes time to hone your craft there, and to see the success he had this first year. I'll be the first to tip my hat, because I felt like Luka was the pick. I felt like Luka still is the pick. If I was doing it today, I'd take Luka. But I don't know that it's as obvious as what it was.
Trae had towards the second half of the season, he had a streak of games that were just insane.
Oh, absolutely.
And 30, 40 points a game for like a streak of 10, and so again, but if you want to evaluate it on who do we think actually won that trade, what about who makes the playoffs first? What do you guys think? Who's going to make the playoffs first between Dallas and Atlanta?
I think that's all about where they're located.
Sure.
I think if Dallas is playing the East, I think they're playoff ready next season.
Right.
But they're not, and the West is stacked. So I mean, I think the Hawks could sneak in this next year.
I think you're right. I think the Hawks make the playoffs first.
I actually kind of see it backwards. I see the fact that Porzingis comes back, and then you've added a guy like Boban who's gonna. I mean, you're solidifying this team in Dallas. I think maybe there's some other pieces they could still add, but I can see them getting there initially. But they better do it quick. Atlanta's coming. I think they're stacked for a while.
Well, what helps your case is I think Dallas definitely could have a ceiling that none of us are putting on it yet. I mean, Luka looked amazing this year. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're talking rookie of the year, but like, I mean, I think he's one of those guys that's on. I don't think he's MVP caliber per se, but I think he could be in that conversation
for sure.
sooner
Yeah,
than
no
we
doubt.
think. And I think I kind of comparing to Porzingis in that, like both guys have impressed me big time coming into the league, and you got them on the same team now. So who knows where?
Have you seen the pictures recently of Porzingis working
is
out?
jacked.
He is jacked to the max.
He looks like Ivan Drago.
There's word going
He
around.
really
if-
does.
If he's
He
going to
does.
keep up his
Weird.
bar fights whenever
If
he
he
goes
does,
to
he
Europe.
does.
Yeah,
He-
I've heard
He doesn't want to lose anymore
I know.
to just normal patrons on the street.
I feel bad for him.
It's not NBA related.
The rumors around that,
actually.
I think, is that I think he's got a troublesome brother, which Ben could certainly speak to. But
Absolutely.
But look, I think Luka can't do it on his own. I mean, he's very good. I think he's got the potential to be one of the top 10 players in the NBA. But a lot of it's going to rely on Kristaps, and we haven't seen Kristaps play since February of. It's been a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it's been a long time. So we'll see.
But he will break you.
He will break you.
Well, and like I said, with these guys in their first year, had a great first year, an amazing first year, especially the top five. And you get done with the season, and you come out of college, you don't really know what to expect in the NBA. But you come out of the first year in the NBA, there's a lot you can do being that fresh of a player to completely up your game. And you're right. We're seeing guys hitting the weight room in a big way, but maintain their shot. And you watch guys like Kawhi last year and how he bullied people around because he was just stronger.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You see someone like
Westbrook does that all the time.
But
Runs people over.
Right. And you see guys like Luka, you see guys like Jared Jackson Jr. Like, what can they do in the offseason that gives them a little bit more edge that they saw over the span of a season? And that's where it gets really interesting. Let's get into some big questions here. And I think this is this is where I have a lot of fun. Who's the biggest bust of the 2018 draft? We're going to talk about 2019, I'm sure, very soon down the road. But
sure.
like 2018, who?
And we're calling this not right now. We're calling who will we look back in 10 years and say was the biggest bust in this draft.
Let's go right now, too.
do both,
Right
yeah.
now, then let's do 5 years. What do we got?
All right, Mike. I hate to do
It's
this.
tough.
I feel
It's
like I'm
tough.
ragging on the guy. The answer right now and in 5 years for me is Mo Bamba. And the thing is if I'm wrong, I would love to be wrong about this. Look, and it looks even worse because the top 5 picks, it looks so good, and he's taken it 6 to Orlando, and he's got all the tools. I mean, all the videos that I see, of course, every NBA offseason video you see, you don't ever see anybody missing threes. You notice that? It's always like they're draining 10 and maybe they're editing it up. I don't know how they're slicing it, but he can shoot. Okay, he's huge. Like I said, he's got a giant wingspan. He should be able to pull down a bunch of boards. But how am I supposed to take it that Orlando just signed Vucevic to a long-term deal?
All right.
Yeah.
Say?
I'm on board with Bamba for 5 years. I think right now I'm worried about Kevin Knox.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
to be honest, Madison Square Garden is where young players go to die, and that's where
Right now.
that's
You're on a
where
bad
Kevin
team and
Knox
don't
is
stand
stuck
out.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this was a tough draft to pick a bust from. I will say it's very
100%.
tough.
That's credit. Joe, what do you think?
I mean, it's a careful bust question for me, but I can't get off Michael Porter. I know we'll speak to him a little later,
Yeah.
but I mean, only because I will say that when this draft happened, I knew that it was a stacked draft, and I still was the guy that was like, whoever takes Porter, I don't care where they take him. If they take him, that's the pick. Like, I feel like this guy may not play a lot this year, but he's gonna take a team to another level. So wherever they get him, it's a steal, and to be this
Well,
far into it,
the
and
team
not
that's
play.
got him. I mean, if he can actually contribute to Denver this upcoming year,
Oh,
Denver's
man.
already got an amazing team.
Yes.
He could be the straw.
He's got to be healthy
For sure.
I don't know, but we could look back and say he could be the best player in this draft. That's what's crazy.
He could
He's
be.
got that kind of talent.
Well, I'm going to go with Knox just because I like ragging on New York, especially
So easy.
with their ownership right now. It's not that I don't love the Knicks. I love the Knicks.
Well, Knox was that guy that came in after the draft and had a great summer league. I mean,
Yeah.
there were people talking about how Knox was, that he should have been drafted higher after summer league, and just the praise was so high. And I thought to myself, he's got the pedigree. He's on a bad team. Yeah. Maybe he's Rookie of the Year material, and he definitely fell short of that.
It's completely unfair, but I saw him out playing at this past Summer League, too, and that's the one game that Zion played, and Zion just stole his entire soul by ripping the ball from him and letting loose
I can't wait to watch it.
Literally earthquake-inducing. I'm just kidding, but it was insane. Look, and the other problem with Knox is, too, is that the Knicks took Mitchell Robinson in this same draft, and he actually ended up being the more productive pick for them. He's actually, he may be in my steals column later. So,
all right, we've hinted on this, but best pick, just real quick, around the horn. What do we got?
It's Luka Doncic. I think what Dallas did was exactly what you should have done. I think he was a great pick.
Nice.
It's Luka now, but in 5 years, I think it's Trae Young. Wow. I really do.
Okay.
Man, I like Luka just because we're talking about that trade, but I mean, he was picked, third overall? Was it third that he was picked? And,
he was.
And we're not talking about the other two teams that completely passed on him. You know? It's the Hawks letting him go from trading down. But
and as a Grizzlies fan, I just want to say I'm so glad we weren't in the position to screw that up.
Right. Seriously.
And I love Jaren. I'm so excited about Jaren Jackson. But if Luka would have been there,
I got the text from you, and I thought to myself, he won't be there, and so we were fortunate not to blow
you talk
that.
about best pick too. I think you got to talk about value. The Clippers ended up with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah. He was chosen 11th. I think that guy's got money written all over him. He's now going to Oklahoma City.
That's one guy.
He's gonna.
All those names are one guy.
All those are one guy.
Shai Gilgeous.
He's now going to Oklahoma City. He's going to get an opportunity. He had a solid year for the Clippers this year. I think he's a guy to watch.
So that takes us into and sort of the next thing is the biggest steal. Would you consider him the biggest steal? Or do we go a little later?
I think he's pretty good, but and this is somebody we touched on a minute ago. I think the steal might have been Herter in Atlanta.
I was going to say Herter.
That guy was so good. He shot something like 39% from three. I mean, as a rookie coming in to be that second guy, and he's playing with Trae Young. He was going to get him the ball. He's getting surrounded with other guys. He's going to continue to shoot from three.
It's almost too cute, right? Because what Shank's doing is, you don't think about it, and I know that it's the easy article to write, okay? But you leave Golden State, and you come into Atlanta, and you draft Trae Young, who's supposed to be your Steph, and then you get Herter later from Maryland, who's kind of a goofy-looking, white, red-haired kid, but can just bury threes. Sorry, Coach. But you can just bury threes, and any kind of – they're setting up that model of we're about to outscore you. And Herter had a really good year. That's going to be my steal, too.
I like his game. It seems like he's going to be a guy that's going to be around for a long time.
Sure. I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with Grayson Allen's first year. I mean, what a trip, right? That guy.
There it is.
That guy.
There it is.
Coming in at number 21.
He's going to get some significant
Who's he play
minutes.
for now?
He plays for the Grizzlies when he's still in the game, and I mean,
interesting summer league for him too. And he's still punching people in the head.
That's no lie.
He's not punching people in the head.
I don't want to make him a villain. He's not worthy of it yet. But I mean,
villains have to be pretty good. We talked about that.
Exactly. If he is on a team in college that's not got a blue blood jersey on it, he probably doesn't get drafted, and he's the 21st pick. I mean, I think if you got a guy with a history like his, and he's playing for Dayton, who is a respectable program, but not on Duke's level, you're like, we'll see if
maybe
he can
he'll sign with some team after the draft.
Make a team,
Sure.
Gosh.
I always think about, from a fan perspective, and I have a really good buddy who's a season ticket holder in Atlanta, and season ticket Grizzly holder, here, and that's the thing is I know what I expected this last year. And I know what I expect this year. And it's, I'm climbing. It's going to be more fun this year just because of what happened. But I think about him over in Atlanta. And I'm thinking about what he had to experience last year versus what he's going to get to probably experience this year and then the year after. So, in Brian over in Atlanta, I mean, he's just, I get pictures from him all the time. And it's exciting. But man, this year's going to be great to be an Atlanta fan.
They're setting something up nice over
there. That's the overall young team. That was actually the last preseason game I saw was the Hawks and the Grizzlies, and I literally thought this team is so bad. The Grizzlies won the game I was at by about 15 points, and again, it's preseason, but because both teams were so young or had a lot of young talent, I saw a lot of those guys out there, and I just thought Atlanta has made a lot of mistakes, and they didn't. They were just young, and they grew together, and did a great job last season. So I'm excited to see what they can do with it.
Yeah. So let's talk about this guy. Let's talk about Michael Porter Jr. Who was 14th? Mm-hmm. 14th of the draft?
14th to Denver. Right.
What are you thinking about this?
Well, I read all the stories on him because I believe when he came over to play at Mizzou, his father was actually hired on. It was one of those things where Mizzou was building this thing. And
had to get a waiver.
It was a huge, huge story because this guy was one of the top recruited players in the nation. And let's just take a look at
He was the top. He was the number one rated high school player coming out.
So he's 6'10", he's 210 pounds. He can shoot the lights out. Okay, he's extremely athletic. Yeah, but look, what concerns me about Porter and why it's do you even? You could argue, do you even call it a bust? It's certainly a high risk, but if you're Denver and you're picking at 14, you look at the picks after that. It's like, you know what? We're already in pretty good position. Let's take a chance here. He's got back issues. The guy's had a back surgery, and that concerns me.
Yeah, but bust is an offensive word, but I mean the bust wasn't in the pick. I think at 14, that's a risk I'm taking if I'm an owner to have maybe a top pick. You know,
he's more of a wait and see,
right?
Yeah.
And also for him, I mean, again, using the term bust sounds offensive, but I mean he's hurt like in a serious way, like you said. Yeah. So if he gets 100%, if he's healthy, he will be a good NBA player. There's no doubt.
I agree.
It's just, can he get healthy?
What's frustrating, and I think he fits into the NBA today too, especially. But what's really frustrating, I think he was going to play out at Summer League, and I was really getting excited to watch him, and then I think he got hurt again, like some other little tweak, and it's just like, well, we're not going to.
Isn't it an Embiid story though? Like he couldn't even play at Kansas. Like he hardly played at Kansas, and then his rookie year didn't play.
Speaking of Instagram pictures of people lifting, Embiid looks like he shed about 15 too. I love that guy, but he needed to shed about 15. He was sucking wind in the playoffs. There's no doubt about it.
And it played a role.
Yeah,
it absolutely played a role.
No doubt.
So we talk about top 10, top 20. Who do we think is the most likely in the 2018 draft after the season that they had? It was a good season, let's say, for this person. They hit the radar with a lot of us fans. Who's the most likely to sort of fall back, sort of come back to earth, and not have such a great second season?
Can't wait to hear what you guys say.
Well, you're going to disagree. I think it's Trae Young. The only reason I say Trae Young, and I like Trae Young, I can't. He's one of the more streakiest players, at least with just one season of NBA that I've ever seen. So, I think that's risky. I mean, he doesn't guard anybody. He doesn't really have to, so he's not going to be a two-way guy. But his value to Atlanta is putting up a ton of points, and he's a good facilitator too. Don't get me wrong, but if he's not making shots, and we're relying on Herter, we're relying on John Collins, both guys that can really play some ball. I think he's got a chance to come back and have a year where it's. Man, he never really hit the high point or his apex of this season.
I mean, I hear you. It's a terrible, terrible take, but I hear you. So my thought initially is Marvin Bagley. Yeah. So Bagley misses 20 games last year. It was a small injury, if I remember. It was like a thumb or a finger or something like that. But that feels disheartening, and I feel like in this draft, isn't Sacramento always going to look back and go, why didn't we take Luka?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do it at number 2?
It's interesting, too, because I don't think we brought this up, but just as an aside, Joe and I were talking about this earlier. There was a lot of talk about Sacramento jumping up and taking Porter Jr. with that second
there
pick.
was a ton.
Absolutely.
Look, I think they made the right call there. I mean, Bagley, I think he's a good player, and I think Sacramento's an extremely exciting team. I think De'Aaron Fox may be the most exciting point guard in the league. And so we'll see where it turns out. But yeah, I understand why you'd say that about Bagley.
All right. Go ahead.
Mine's more schematically. I think Triple J. I don't think he's overrated. I just think that the way
throw you out of this.
The way that
Man,
the grit.
he's
but
really going to
seriously,
do it.
No, I think that he came into a situation where he didn't have to be the man, and then where he became the best player because the talent, so to speak, was traded out. It was a pressure free, and not that anyone has high expectations, but our expectations of him are really high now.
Player on the team.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's because he can't meet expectations. I just think with all the hype around him right now, I think that's a lot to shoulder at
I'm
his
about to
point.
send Joe so many clips. I can't wait.
Yeah, we're all big fans of him, but what I think is really interesting is, what was around him last year in his first season versus what's around him now. We don't know what story that's going to be.
Yeah. Ja looks amazing, right? And there was a great article in the Ringer this past week about why Ja fits in perfectly with the kind of, again, unicorn game that Triple J has. He's not a traditional big in the mode of Embiid. I know Embiid wants to shoot a lot of threes. I would advise him against doing that unless I see something different. But I think Conley's not there. Gasol's not there. He's definitely got to be the man.
I was going to say, more to that is I think Triple J had a really clutch season. I mean, to be a rookie, there was times where he was hit, 4-point plays in the final minutes to win games that mean nothing in the retrospect of, playoffs. But still, for a rookie to do some phenomenal things like that, I question whether or not anyone puts a back-to-back season like that, more or less a rookie. I hope I'm way wrong, and obviously I'm a huge fan.
But just quick aside, did you know, I think Ja, don't hold me to this, I think Ja's older than Jaren. I'm not kidding.
Really?
That doesn't surprise me.
Jaren's
Yeah.
19.
He's one of the youngest guys in the league still.
Insane.
Well,
a year later.
Just a question that we didn't really prep for or even talk about before, but I think this is an interesting one. Coming out of that draft in 2018, not even talking about their careers, their trajectories, who means the most to their team that year? Because, you talk about this year, you've got talk of New Orleans moving.
Yeah.
And then they land the number 1 pick and they land Zion, the potential to get Zion, and they sell out. They start selling out season tickets. I mean, it's a mad dash. In terms of what it means to a team, what it means to, what you could do the next few years, which team wins? And that's a little bit of a different question than which player wins the draft in 2018. But which team do you think comes away with it? And let's, because we're running out of time.
Sure. Real quick, it's Dallas. I mean, for me, it's Dallas. Look, they didn't have an identity. Dirk's getting old. Who are we going to get to replace Dirk? And then they get Luka, who's, in my opinion, the best player in this draft, maybe the best player in the draft for the next 5 to 10 years. And then you get Kristaps, and you change pretty much in 6 months your entire franchise.
I think we're going to look at this here in the next year or two, and it's going to be Denver. I really do think that. I think Porter comes back, and he turns into at least serviceable enough. And Denver is already on the cusp, guys.
Yeah, they are.
They're going to
That's a
contend this
phenomenal
year.
team. I think the team that moves the needle the most is the Hawks, and not just because of Trae Young. I think he has exceeded my expectations. Like y'all said, they had some other big picks around that were big. I think when a team looks like they did last season, and then you're talking about them making the playoffs this year, I think you've changed the franchise. So,
yeah. I agree with all those points. All right, so what are your thoughts? If you're listening at home, what are your thoughts on the group of players we saw come into the league in the 2018 draft? We've got the 2019 draft that just happened. We have no idea what that's going to be, but we do have a little bit of data on 2018. What do you think? What are you the most excited about from the 2019 draft class? Come tell us about it. Go to upshotpodcast.com. And let us know in the comments. If we said something that you don't agree with, let us know. Tell us. And remember that you can grab all the notes from the show, charts, all the things that we put together to do research for the show. You can grab it all at upshotpodcast.com. Also, remember, subscribe to the Upshot Podcast and make sure to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening to podcasts. And so let us know. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you are in strong opposition to what we're doing. And you know what? Come back next week. Every week, we've got the biggest moments in the NBA and why they matter now. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Upshot NBA Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to click the subscribe button so you can get a new Upshot episode every week. And make sure to leave us a review on your podcast app as soon as you're done listening.